At the start of 1990, Neil Young was in a better position than he had been in years. Unlike all his previous albums through the 1980s, his latest album, Freedom, was both a commercial and a critical success, and he had stormed back onto television with his electrifying Saturday Night Live performance. So naturally, in typical Neil Young style, he ditched the producer that he'd made the record with, and all but one of the musicians he had used over the last two albums. As the new decade dawned, Young wanted only one thing: to make a new record with his old friends David Briggs and Crazy Horse. Starting to compile material for his massive archives project, Young had been sifting through old footage of he and the horse playing together in 1976 and was blown away by how loose and free they used to play together. Young wondered if they could ever get that way again. David Briggs had been at the Saturday Night Live performance in New York in September of '89, but it had been Nico Bolas who had engineered the sound and helped choose the band members for that night. Young and Briggs' relationship had always been rocky, but had taken a serious nosedive during the 1986 tour and subsequent live album that was recorded on that tour. Tensions between the band and the crew had often erupted, and Briggs had ended up leaving the tour early. Now, with Young wanting to make amends and make a new record, Briggs laid down the law. "I want you to understand that you're just one of the band," Briggs said to Young. "If you start trying to produce the record, I'll be gone. If you start trying to arrange the record, I will leave. Your only jobs will be to be songwriter, guitarist, and singer." Young agreed and arranged a meeting with the members of Crazy Horse and Briggs at a restaurant in California. After the tensions and rows of the '86 tour, Billy Talbot and Ralph Molina were both very ready to say no in a heartbeat to Neil if he didn't make the right noises. At the meeting, Young apologised to the band for his previous misuse of them and told them about his desire for them to get back playing like they had done in '76, whatever it took. Ralph said that Young told them to do whatever you got to do. If you were smoking pot, then go ahead and do it. Young went further and assigned all the blame for past wrongdoings to himself in a blatant attempt to assuage all their doubts, and basically said everything that they wanted to hear in order to just get the horse going again. They only had one stipulation: that they don't record the new album at Young's ranch. Instead, they wanted it to be on neutral territory. Young acceded to this as well, and his conciliatory words worked. In April of 1990, Neil Young and Crazy Horse, with David Briggs, began working on a new album. Although Young instantly reneged on his promise not to record at the ranch, as the entire album ended up being recorded at the ranch. As with the rockier songs from Freedom, the band was recorded live, playing in one of Young's equipment barns on his ranch. For this album, Briggs and Young returned to the recording method employed on the Tonight's the Night album. Briggs was stationed outside in a remote truck and would record everything that the band played. Literally everything. "If you miss one note Neil plays," he said, "I guarantee you that will be the opening note of the song that he wants to use. If he walks back in 3 weeks and you can't play it back, you're gone." The barn was the antithesis of the modern recording studio. The space acted as a giant amp that became swamped with feedback from all the noise. Briggs' engineer, John Hanlon, desperately tried to get some sort of separation by gluing plexiglass sheets onto the sides of the drum kit, but Young complained that they were blocking the sound of Poncho's guitar, so they were taken off after only one song. "I had vocals coming out of the kick drum mic," Hanlon said, "feeding back into the PA. Everything else, it was an exercise in leakage, swim and wash." The band played a set of songs twice a day for a couple of weeks, never repeating the same songs in one set. Also, like they had done during the recording of Tonight's the Night, Young decided that no one would listen to anything that they'd done so far until the entire thing was done, including himself. In doing so, he freed himself and the band from worrying about the recording process, to the point where they forgot they were even recording at all. The results were the freest rock record Young and the Horse had made since Zuma. In terms of the songs, at first the new songs were only half formed, and a lot of them still had unfinished lyrics. Briggs suggested then that instead they try to warm up by running through some old unreleased songs from the '70s, like Country Home and White Line. These ended up coming out so well, they ended up being the opening 2 songs on the finished album. 2 of the songs recorded featured extended jams that stretched the songs out to beyond 10 minutes each, harking back to the album Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere in 1969. Young acknowledged the comparison between the 2 albums, stating, "Yeah, it's probably closer to that record than anything else I've done." Young said the long jams were a deliberate choice because he wasn't hearing that anywhere else at the time. "There's nothing spontaneous going on records these days," he said to Rolling Stone, "except in blues and funkier music. Rock and roll used to have all that, and after spending the whole of the 1980s in complete thrall to them, he was now finally shedding all the synthesizers, drum machines, MIDI machines and whatnot that he had been forcing the members of Crazy Horse to play with on their previous tours and in their previous recording sessions in the 80s, driving them all mad in the process. We just played like a band," he said. "You just can't get that old-time vibrating feelings with machines. That happens with musicians who just love to play and improvise together." The final day of the recording yielded 4 songs that ended up being on the album. One of them was not just recorded in one take, but it had not even been rehearsed. The album version is literally the first run-through with the band of the song. According to guitarist Poncho, it came about when he asked Young, "Hey, why don't we play something that you played in your first band when you were just starting out? Something different, just to be loose." Young then launched straight into the opening chords of Farmer John, a song Young had played as a teenager in his first band, The Squires. Originally by R&B duo Don and Dewey, who was also recorded in the 60s by The Searchers, and garage rock band The Premiers. Its inclusion on the album was inspired, as the song was actually one of the founding stones of Young's guitar style. It was the very first song that when he played it live with a band back in 1964, he found he could improvise a solo and that the band could follow him as well. "We kept that song going for 10 minutes, said the Squires drummer Bill Edmondson. "People didn't want it to end." Young said later, "That's when I started to realise I had the capacity to lose my mind when playing music and not just play the song and be cool." More than just a throwaway cover then, Farmer John is one of the historical building blocks of Young's multifaceted musical attack. The version recorded at the ranch 25 years later in one take was rightly given pride of place right there in the middle of the album. When you're 42, singing "Farmer John, I'm in love with your daughter," bassist Billy Talbot said, "it's going to sound like dirty old men." Indeed, but as Young's biographer Jimmy McDonough said, but these were joyous dirty old men. The term ragged glory, never has an album title been more apt to describe the music contained within it, applies to no song better than it applies to this version of Farmer John. It's glorious, it's ragged, it's wrong, but it's so right. One song that was fully formed going into the recording was Fucking Up. Young had played it during the warm-up for the Saturday Night Live performance. This song, among others on the album, mark a return to a more personal songwriting, after the more state-of-the-world type songs on Freedom. In this song, the blame for the fucked-up-edness of everything is squarely apportioned to himself and no one else. "Only I can bring you down," he sings. "Why do I keep fucking up?" Love to Burn finds Young going even deeper into himself, imploring himself to stay open and not shut down emotionally like he'd done 10 years earlier. "It's that moment when you're sitting there going, I got a lot to give," he said later. "You just gotta stay open and not shut down because of all the bad stories, life stories and bad news movies. Where you taking my kid? Why'd you ruin my life?" Young cries, and you get the feeling that that's not just a turn of phrase, but something that was said in real life at some point. It's no coincidence that Love to Burn is the second longest jam on the album. The guitar solo explores the depths beyond the words. Young used the band like the vessel in Fantastic Voyage, taking a trip deep inside, wrote Jimmy McDonough in his biography Shaky. The longest song, Love and Only Love, is a more defiant and optimistic version of Love to Burn. "Spirit, come back to me, give me strength and set me free," he sings. "Love is not only worth taking a chance on, it's the only thing that endures. Hate is everything you think it is. Love and only love will break it down." Some of the songs are more wistful, looking back at life from the vantage point of being in your mid-40s, most obviously on Days That Used to Be, which deliberately used the same melody as Bob Dylan's looking back song, My Back Pages. In Mansion on the Hill, Young has a vision of a hippie utopia, far away from the road of tears, up on a hill somewhere. Maybe he was thinking back to Laurel Canyon in the late 60s, where he had first met Crazy Horse when they were still called the Rockets. It's a place where psychedelic music fills the air, and where peace and love still live. It's a fantasy, but for the duration of the song, it becomes a temporary reality for everyone who can feel it. Anyone who's open to it. Over and Over is probably the most overt love song on the album, a celebration of a relationship that endures and finds fresh joy in repeating the same experiences, whether physical or emotional, over and over again together. It's clearly addressed to his wife, Peggy, at the time, but it could also just as easily apply to his musical relationship with Crazy Horse, as that went back even further, of course. And now the feeling's just the same, over and over again. Mother Earth, Natural Anthem, was recorded live at Farm Aid on April the 7th, 1990, in Indianapolis. Singing solo with his electric guitar, Crazy Horse then overdubbed the harmonies later at the ranch. The song uses the melody of the traditional British folk song The Water is Wide, recorded by the Seekers and many others in the 1960s. I used different chords and screwed around with it, he said later. The folk process. I'm just an old fogey. Overall, the tone of the album was much more hopeful than Freedom, offering a way through the world of hate by reminding us to stay open to the possibility of love in the natural world, a world away from the road of tears, and with enough self-examination to take stock of everything you have left to give. After its release in September of 1990, like Freedom, Ragged Glory was a critical smash, with rave reviews across the board. I guess Neil Young is the king of rock and roll, wrote Kurt Loder in his Rolling Stone review. Calling the album a great one, he said, "I don't see anybody else on the scene standing anywhere near this tour these days." And the album proved to be a huge influence on the guitar music of the 1990s, particularly for much younger indie bands. The previous year had seen the release of a tribute album called The Bridge, a tribute to Neil Young, featuring covers by the likes of Dinosaur Jr., Sonic Youth, Nick Cave and the Pixies. So Young now found himself positioned as a prime influence on a whole generation of alternative rock and indie artists who, if they weren't citing him as a direct influence, were definitely taking notes. But Neil Young wasn't being crowned the godfather of grunge just yet by the media. Grunge was not yet a thing in the mainstream. Nirvana's Nevermind would not be released until a whole year later, and before then Neil Young and Crazy Horse would embark on a huge tour across the USA, much bigger than the previous one in 1986. To warm up for the tour, the band played 2 shows in November in California, one at the Mountain House in Woodside and one at the Catalyst in Santa Cruz. The latter show was recorded and filmed and was later released as Way Down in the Rust Bucket in 2021. Playing many of the Ragged Glory songs for the first time live, the set also included many rarely played classics such as Homegrown, Danger Bird and Surfer Joe, and also a very rare outing for the most demented Crazy Horse jam ever, T-Bone. Upon its release in 2021, Poncho described this album as the best Crazy Horse record we ever recorded. I love this record. Neil plays great, unbelievably great. He's just electrified. He's completely correct, of course. Rust Bucket is a fantastic document of that moment in time, and although supposedly a warm-up for the tour that followed, most of these songs would actually not be played on the tour. It was all about the beginning of a new era, said Poncho. We were becoming alive. I don't see it as a warm-up. It doesn't hit me like that. Rust Bucket is vintage Horse, but in 1991 everything would blow up again as the band embarked on a massive 53-date tour. Would they still be speaking to each other at the end of it? Well, we'll find out in the next video as we take a look at that tour and the absolute monster of a live album that was released in its wake. So until then, check out the other videos in this series and all the others on this channel. Subscribe if you ain't subscribed, and consider supporting this channel by buying a t-shirt or joining the Patreon, because we ain't sponsored by nobody. Links to all are to be found below. Also, come and see us play live if you can. If you're near enough here in the UK, ticket links below. But that's all from me on this one. Bye for now.